Samach Vav and Beis, the Mishnah spoke about how a huge amount of grain gets harvested, large amount of barley, and out of that barley, a smaller amount becomes the soles, becomes the fine flour that gets into the Karban Minchas HaOmer. So what happens with all the other grain and flour? What's done with that? So the Mishnah says that gets redeemed, and it gets eaten by anyone, by non-Kohanim, by Yisraelim. So what about Shumos and Masros? Normally when you have grain that grew in the land of Israel, 2% has to go to the Kohen as Truma, 10% needs to go to the Levi as Maser Rishon, another 10% needs to be taken up to Yerushalayim and eaten as Maser Sheni. And if Trumot and Masrot are not separated, then the grain is prohibited as Tevel. So what about here? Are there obligations of Trumos and Masros? So the Mishnah says that Rabbi Akiva said that there is an obligation. The Chachamim say it's obligated in Chala, but exempt from Maaser. Now the reason why the leftover grain would be obligated in Chala is because the moment that creates the obligation of Chala is Chala, it's when it becomes a dough. When flour mixes with water and becomes a dough, it's called Gilgul Isa, the rolling of the dough. That's sort of the beginning. That's, the Torah says, Reshis Arisos Sechem, the first of your dough, Chala Tarimu Truma. You take out a piece and you give it to the Kohen. So when it's becoming a dough, it's way after when it was holy, because you got the flour from the Beit HaMikdash, you remove the sanctity, then a week later you make it into dough. So Chala, it's obligated, but the Chachamim say Maaser would be exempt, because the moment when the obligation of Maaser starts is, as Roger told us, the Miruach, when the pile of the grain is smoothed out. When the pile of the grain was smoothed out, this grain belonged to Hekdesh. It was the temple trust that was smoothing out the grain. And the Torah talks about the gancha, your grain, not when it is Hekdesh's grain, the grain that belongs to God, or the grain that belongs to a non-Jew. So therefore, since at the moment of the smoothing, it was Hekdesh grain, even though now you bought it from the Hekdesh, you removed the sanctity, it still was exempt from Maaser, and it stays exempt from Maaser. So the view of the Chachamim is there would be an obligation of Chala on such products, but there wouldn't be an obligation of Maaser. And Rabbi Akiva said it would be obligated both in Chala and in Maaser. So the Gemara said, what's the reasoning of Rabbi Akiva? Is it that he holds that the smoothing out of Hekdesh does not create exemption? The Gemara says, no, that's not his reasoning. His reasoning is that from the very beginning, what was first consecrated as Hekdesh was that which was going to be used in the Karban Omer. The leftover was never holy to start. So therefore, the leftovers were never Miruach, Nimrach, they were never smoothed by Hekdesh, because they never really belonged to Hekdesh. Therefore, they are obligated.
Rabbi, how do they remove the sanctity?
They put money
in there and they buy that.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
It's the only way, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Rabbi Kiva was progressive double tax.
Oh, because he had more going to the Kohen, maybe. So let's start again with Rava. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. About 15 lines from the bottom here. Amar Rava on Samach Vav and Beis. Rava said like this: Pshita li, it's obvious to me, to miruach hekdesh poter. If grain belongs to the temple trust, it belongs to Hekdesh, and while it was the property of Hekdesh, there was miruach, it was smeared, the pile was, oh thank you so much, the pile was smeared. Poter, there would be no obligation ever on that grain of Trumos and Maestros. But I feel Rabbi Akiva, even Rabbi Akiva, who obligates the leftover grain of the Minchas Omer in Trumos and Maestros, Lo kamachayev hasam, he doesn't obligate there. Ella shelo nitnu mos el tzorach lehem. The only reason why he obligates is because the original money to first consecrate the grain was only for what was needed. It wasn't for what wasn't needed. But what was not needed was never made holy in the first place. Avo miruach hekdesh, but if something is in fact, the pile is smeared, the pile is smoothed when it belongs to hekdesh, that ba'alma everywhere else, poter, that would exempt from trumos and maisos. Okay, so that's about hekdesh. What about if the grain belongs to a non-Jew and the non-Jew smooths out the pile? Miruach obed kochavim. If a non-Jew smooths out the pile, so that's tanaihi. That's a dispute amongst the Tanaim, whether that creates a lasting exemption or not.
It's owned by a Jew or not?
No, it's owned by a non-Jew, and the non-Jew smoothed it out.
But what he has no business to be in Beit HaMikdash to begin with.
No, a non-Jew is living in the land of Israel. Ger Toshav, a non-Jew is living
Are
here.
you talking about
Yeah, it grew, right? It grew in the land of Israel in a field of a non-Jew. So that's one chiddush, that there would be an obligation. But the non-Jew is the one who smoothed out the pile. So that's a machlokas Tanaim. The Tanya, Tormin Mishal Yisrael, I'll show Yisrael. We learned in a brayso you can give truma from Jewish grain on behalf of other Jewish grain. Umishal ovdei kochavim, al shal ovdei kochavim. You can give truma from non-Jewish grain on behalf of other non-Jewish grain. Umishal kutiyim, al shal kutiyim. And you can give truma from grain of kutiyim. Kutiyim are the Kutis. These were the Samaritans. For the truma of other kutiyim. Umishal kol, al shal kol. Really, you can give truma, let's say, from non-Jewish grain on behalf of Jewish grain. So what do you see? The fact that it belonged to the non-Jew, and the non-Jew did the smoothing of the pile, does not create an exemption. Because if it would create an exemption, ein tarmin min apater al achiyuv. You can't give truma from what's exempt on what's obligated. You see that the smoothing of the non-Jew doesn't exempt anything. That's Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's Divrei Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Omrim, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon say, Tarim Mishal Yisrael, Al Shal Yisrael. You can take truma out of Jewish grain on behalf of other Jewish grain. Umishal Ovdei Kochavim, Al Shal Kutiyim. You can use the grain of non-Jews to take truma from it on behalf of grain of Samaritans. Mishal Kutiyim, you can use the grain of Samaritans, Al Shal Ovdei Kochavim, on behalf of the grain of non-Jews. Avolo Mishal Yisrael, Al Shal Ovdei Kochavim, but you can't use Jewish grain for the non-Jewish grain, because apparently, according to the view of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, the non-Jewish grain is exempt because it was smooth. The pile was smoothed out by the non-Jewish owner. And we have a rule: ein tarmim min achiyuv ala patr. You can't give truma from what was obligated for that which is not obligated, nor can you use that which is not obligated min patr ala chiyuv. And therefore, v'lo mishal ovdei kochavim v'shal kutiyim. You can't use the grain of Gentiles or kutim al shal Yisrael on behalf of a Jew. So you see that this question, whether the miruach, the smoothing out done by a non-Jew owner on his grain, is going to create a lasting exemption, that's an argument. According to Rabbi Meir, it does not create a lasting exemption. According to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, it does create a lasting exemption. Okay, this is all Rava speaking. Now another law from Rava. Gilgul hektish. When flour is mixed with water and it becomes a dough as hektish, poter. That makes it always exempt. That makes this dough always exempt from challah. Because the moment that obligates challah is when the dough is created. The moment that obligates truma and maaser is when the pile of grain is finished. So the same way we said that the miruach of hekdesh, the smoothing out of the pile of grain, creates an obligation, creates an exemption of trumos and masros. So now, correspondingly, in dough, if at the moment of the dough creation, the dough belonged to hekdesh, and it's hekdesh making the dough, it will be exempt from the mitzvah of taking a piece off and giving it to the Kohen as challah. So Gilgul Hekdesh, the mixing of the flour and the water done by Hekdesh into a dough, Poter exempts from the obligation of Challah, even though the dough was later redeemed from Hekdesh. That's not as you learned in a Mishnah. Hikdisha Isasa, a woman who made her dough Hekdesh, Ad Shelo Gilgala, if she made it Hekdesh before she had mixed the flour and water and made a dough. And then she mixes the flour and water and makes it a dough when it's Hekdesh. And after she had made a dough of Hekdesh, Ufta Asa, she then redeems it with money. So then, if she redeemed it, she made it Hekdesh before she made a dough, and she redeemed it before she made a dough. So she made flour kadosh, then she redeemed the flour, then she made the flour and water into a dough. So then chayeves, and it's obligated in challah. But if she made the flour kadosh, and she only redeemed it, misha gilgala, she only redeemed it after she had made a dough, then uptasa, then she redeems it, then hikdisha, right? If she made it holy, ad shelo gilgal, before she made a dough, the gilgal gizbar and the executive in charge of Hekdesh was the one who made it into dough, then then she redeems it, then she's ptura, she is exempt. So again, the Mishnah says 3 cases. If she made her flour holy and she redeemed it before she made it into a dough, then it wouldn't be obligated in challah. If she made dough when it was chulin, then she makes the dough holy, then she redeems it, it's still obligated in challah. It was obligated in challah the moment she made it into a dough. Then she made that which is obligated in challah holy, and she redeemed it. Okay, so now it's again obligated in challah. If though what she made holy, hikdishat shelo gilgala, she made it holy before she made a dough, then the gilgal gizbar, then Hekdesh made it into a dough, the achakach ta'asav, she then redeems it. Tura, she's now exempt. Shebeshas chovasa haisa ptura, because at the moment of the obligation, she was exempt. At the moment of the obligation, she was exempt. When it became obligated, when it became dough, it was Hekdesh.
Challah is not an obligation just on a woman. Anybody.
Correct, on dough. If any person makes an isaron of flour into dough in a single bowl, so then he's obligated to take off a piece and give it to the Kohen as challah.
Like bake challah Friday night, Friday.
Yeah, you would have to take
Cooked
challah.
or uncooked, Rabbi?
The dough, you should give it as dough. If you didn't and you already baked it, then you have to put all the loaves together in a basket. And you take one of the pieces of the baked loaf once it's in the big basket. So now again, so Gilgul Hekdesh exempts. Boi Rava now asks, Gilgal Ovid Kochavim Mai. What's the law if a non-Jew owns flour and water, and the non-Jew mixed the flour and water and made it into a dough? Does that create a lasting exemption? So Rav explains, Mishnah, we have a Mishnah in Mesechet Challah. The Mishnah says, Gershon is Gayer, if a convert has converted, V'haisalo Isa, and he has dough. So if Naseis Ad Shalon is Gayer, if the dough had become a dough before he had converted, in other words, it became a dough when he was a non-Jew, Potter, even though now he's a Jew, he's exempt from separating challah, because the moment that creates the obligation is when it's becoming a dough, and then he was a non-Jew. However, Mishin is Gayer, if it became a dough after he had converted, so it became a dough and it was his and he was a Jew, then chayiv. So now he's obligated to separate challah. And if suffik, if he's not sure when it became a dough, so chayiv. So it's a suffik dough raisa. So he has to separate challah. So Haman Katanila. So this is the question. Who is the author of this Mishnah? Do we say Divrei HaKolhi? Do we say it's everyone? And even Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who say that if a non-Jew smooths out a pile of grain, it's still obligated in Trumas and Maasros. They obligate with the non-Jew smoothing, but Patri Hacha. But maybe they would exempt here when a non-Jew makes it into dough. Hassam over there, Hudichsev, that's where it says.
But owned by a Jew.
No, owned by a non-Jew.
So why is he obligated for Maaseh?
He later converts.
Oh, convert.
Yeah. So, but with the non-Jew with Maaseh, the reason why it would be obligated is they would be according to the opinion that since it grew in the land of Israel, the non-Jew can't take away the obligation that comes from the land, even if he wouldn't convert.
So
Here we're talking about conversion in regards to the
it has to be done simultaneously here, Rabbi, right? The conversion and the Maaseh thing they're together, right?
Why non-Jews could give Maaser?
I mean, the conversion takes usually 6 months or a year to do conversion.
Okay.
It cannot be done overnight, but
But
prior
it goes from non-Jew to Jew instantly.
Right. At whatever point it can happen quickly. So again, so maybe if either Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda do come a chayvi hasam, even Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda obligate when Trumas and Maasros, when there was a miruach of a non-Jew. Nevertheless, patri hacha. Nevertheless, they would exempt here in regards to gilgul isa, the mixing together of dough. Because hasam hudich there's a special verse. It says degancha yesera. It says multiple times degancha, like it says in Dvarim 12:17. Lo sucha lecho b'sharecha maaser degancha. And then it says in Dvarim 14:23. V'achalt lifnei Hashem lokecha b'makom asher yivchar l'shakein shmo sham maaser degancha tirosh chavitzarecha. It says in 18:4. Reishis degancha tirosh chavitzarecha v'reishis goat sonecha titein lo. So it keeps saying degancha. So the gancha means your grain. So keep saying your grain is what has Trumas and Maasros. So therefore, the way Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda interpret it is havi miyud achar miyud. But if it says the gancha, it mean your grain, but not the grain of a non-Jew, because that's digun of the kochav, not the gancha, not your grain. But it keeps repeating that. It says your grain, your grain, your grain. So whenever you have a repetition again and again to exclude, ultimately that makes it included. So since it's your grain, but then again your grain, so now it must mean even not your grain. Because if it really only meant only your grain, it would have said it once. Saying it multiple times is to exclude. Saying to exclude multiple times is ultimately to include. So therefore, since it says the gancha yasera, having miyud achar miyud, it excludes after it excludes, and ein miyud achar miyud el rabos, and that's why they say afilu of the kochavim, even if it's the grain of a non-Jew, it's still obligated. It's included to teach you that you have to have the right amount of dough. So how much dough is obligated in challah? The same amount of dough that you used to eat in the desert. You used to get in the desert an omer of man. So if you made an omer worth of flour into dough, you have to separate challah. Now the other time it says your dough, is to say your dough, but not the dough of non-Jews, not the dough made by non-Jews. V'lo isas hekdesh, and not the dough made by hekdesh. So therefore, maybe everybody agrees in regards to challah that if the mixing of the flour into dough is by non-Jews who own it, not a riso seichem, not your dough, then it is exempt from challah. Or maybe this Rava still speaking, or possibly Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon Katanila. This brayso that I quoted that said that the dough made by the non-Jew is not obligated in challah. That's only Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon, the kapatri, who exempt grain that is smoothed out by the non-Jew from Trumas and Maasros. Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who say that based on a miyud achar miyud, the two exclusions ultimately includes they say that the multiple exclusions of the gancha is ultimately to say that when regards to Trumas and Maisros, the grain of non-Jews is obligated in Trumas and Maisros. So since they're including the grain of non-Jews in Trumas and Maisros, the smoothing out, according to them, of the pile of grain by the non-Jew does not exempt it. So if it doesn't exempt, since we have a Gzeira Shava, Reishis, it says Reishis Ariso Seichem, the first of your dough, and it says Reishis Degancha, the first of your grain. So since there's a connection between Truma and Chala, we have to learn and say that just like in Truma, the Miruach of the non-Jew does not create an exemption, in Chala, the Gilgal of the non-Jew also doesn't create an exemption. And maybe they would hold that in Chala there is an obligation.
Rabbi, if the field is owned by a non-Jew, okay, and they growing grain, and he cuts the grain,
Right.
and a Jew come and buys the whole pile, one shot, is he obligated to do Maaseh right now, the Jew here, or he's not?
That's the argument. That's the argument of the Tanaim.
So, I mean, do we know the answer yet? Or
How do we paskin? I believe that we rule that there is an obligation.
There's an obligation from it. So when he buys the pile, he has to put 10% on this side.
Yeah,
You know,
Because
even though he
from the
didn't, he didn't grow it, he didn't cut it,
He inherits it, right?
nothing, right?
I think so. That's
So that would be like 10% of the income situation here that we have here. Is that right?
let's just
Raise your
check.
prices
So
when
we-
you sell the grain, right?
You
Cover
know,
your costs.
Let's
I know.
just see here what
Good job,
it
David.
says.
And by today, by the way, today's Rabbi Shapiro's birthday.
Oh, Mayor Shapiro. That's amazing. Wow. Wow,
All here because of
special.
him.
That's right.
If the non-Jew makes dough, it is exempt.
What did you say? In Paul Allen.
before making dough, it's just a pile of the grain.
So no. So we say that the grain of the non-Jew is exempt.
But if a Jew buys them as a pile, it becomes,
Hence,
obligated.
when he bought it, if he bought it before the pile was smoothed, and the Jew smoothed out the pile, it would be obligated. If you bought it after the pile was smoothed, it would not be obligated.
It would not be obligated. You see? Loophole. Remember that.
Yeah, the miruach. It's like the finish,
So
right?
when you shave, you're obligated.
So again, Amar Rava, after Rava has this question, he says, Yehi Rava derzi b'chilma. May it be Hashem's will that I should see it in a dream. In other words, I hope that Hashem reveals to me the answer to this question, whether the non-Jew who makes dough, is that dough exempt according to everybody or not? So then Rava did resolve the question. Hadamar Rava, then Rava said, the one who says that the non-Jew who smooths out a pile exempts that his pile from Shumas and Maestros, namely Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, he would hold Gilgal Ovid Kochavim Poter. He would hold that if a non-Jew made dough, it's exempt from Chala. The opinion that says that if the non-Jew smooths out the pile, it's still obligated in Shumas and Maestros, he would hold Gilgal Ovid Kochavim Eino Poter. He would hold that if the non-Jew makes the dough, it also is not exempt. Okay, so that's what Rava said, that there is a total parallel between Miruach and Gilgal. Eis v'Rav Papa l'Rava. So Rav Papa now challenges Rava from a brisa about Truma. We learned, Ovid Kochavim Shehifrish, a non-Jew who is a rancher, and he sets aside a sheep to redeem Peter Chamor, to redeem the firstborn donkey that was born in his ranch. Or a non-Jew who separates challah, who separates a piece of dough as challah. Modian also shu pater. We would tell him and say, listen, you're exempt from this. You're a non-Jew. You don't have to separate. You don't have to redeem the firstborn donkey with a sheep. You don't have to give challah. And therefore chalaso is not challah. And therefore ne'achalas l'zar, it can be eaten by non-kohanim. Upeter chamor, and his firstborn donkey is not holy. The sheep for the firstborn donkey is not holy. The gozes, they can cut the wool of that sheep. For oved bo, and you can work it like any animal that's not holy. So what do you see? Chala, not. Peter Chamor, not. Ha-truma, so implying that the non-Jew separates truma. That is truma. That is asura. That becomes the property of Kohanim, and it's prohibited to non-Kohanim. So apparently the non-Jew smearing does not exempt from truma, even though the non-Jew's gilgul is exempting from challah. So that's against Rava, because Rava's conclusion is that whatever is true about miruach is true about gilgul, and here you're seeing a split. If this Tana holds that the non-Jew's truma is truma, that means that when the non-Jew smoothed out the pile, it didn't exempt it from truma. And nevertheless, this Tana is the one saying that gilgul over kochavim poter, that making the flour into dough exempts the dough. And furthermore, Ravina l'Rava. We know that Ravina challenged Rava from another brisa. A brisa again about challah. It says, chalas ovid kochavim, the challah of non-Jews, from grain ba'aretz that grew in the land of Israel, u'trumasa, and the truma that a non-Jew separates from grain b'chutz la'aretz, outside of Israel. Modinos shu pater. We tell this non-Jew, listen, you don't need to give challah, you don't need to give truma, and therefore this challah that you separated, nechelas lazarim, can be eaten by non-kohanim. This truma that you separated, Eina Midamas, doesn't have the status of truma. If it would fall into a mixture, it wouldn't make the whole mixture problematic. Okay, implying, where is it that his grain is not going to be truma? B'chutz la'aretz. Ha-truma so ba'aretz, but his grain in the land of Israel, where there's a biblical obligation, asura, that does become truma. Umidamas, and if it falls into a mixture, it makes it a mixture of truma and chulin. So what's going on again? Here's again a Tana saying that in regards to truma, the fact that the non-Jew smoothed out the pile did not exempt. And nevertheless, in regards to challah, gilgul over kochavim poter, the fact that the non-Jew made it into a dough means it is exempt from challah. So it seems to be against Rava. Answers the Gemara, no. Really, according to Rava, and what even these braisos, the same way when the non-Jew smooths out a pile, it's exempt from truma. If the non-Jew made the flour into dough, the dough is exempt from challah. The challah that's taken from it is not challah. Why did it say here that it is obligated in challah? It's a new challah. It's a challah midrabbanan. Midrabbanan. This is an obligation rabbinically. I'm sorry, not that the challah is challah midrabbanan. The truma is truma midrabbanan. Truma also he would be exempt, since he made the pile of grain. He smoothed out the pile. He's really exempt from truma. Why did it say that there's a truma here? It's not a real truma. It's a rabbinic obligation of truma. Gzeira mishum bale kisin, a decree because of rich Jews who are going to try to have tax planning. What are they going to do? These Jews have lots of fields, and they don't want to give away a lot to the Kohen as truma. So what are they going to do? Right when the field is getting harvested, they bring in their local non-Jew, and they say, okay, I want to sell you the field. So now the non-Jew will own it when it gets smoothed out. And then they'll say, okay, now sell it back. So they'll have this type of a fraudulent conveyance to prevent an obligation of truma. So that's what the rabbi said, you know what, if non-Jews make the pile, you have to pay truma too. That's no way out of that. But really, non-Jews should be exempt.
Rabbi, are we saying here that we can eat a challah made by non-Jews? It sounds like...
challah here, well, the word challah doesn't mean a loaf of bread. The word challah means the piece of dough taken out of the dough and given to a kohen. Nowadays, since our kohanim are all impure, we can't give it to a kohen to eat because truma and challah has to be eaten in a state of purity, so we burn that piece of dough. And because that dough is taken off and burned, the loaf is called challah. But when we talk about challah, we're talking about the dough that's taken off.
Okay, so but in a cooked state, we have to eat the challah we know today has to be made by a Jew, right?
No.
That's for other reasons, because we don't want to eat, exactly pas Yisrael. We don't want to eat that which is baked by a non-Jewish neighbor, but if it would be baked in a bakery, pas palterin, that is okay. But we saw a little bit of that in Avodah Zarah. We'll see it also when we get to Chulin, the next Masechta, God willing.
So, Rabbi, the people that they sell the store, the business on Friday for $1 to the manager and buy it back Musa Shabbos, it's illegal, right? What is that?
I don't know that it's illegal. I mean, I'm more of a liberal on these questions. I think that if Hashem created loopholes, He created them so that they would be able to be
So they
used.
really could do that, Rabbi? Is it,
I think so.
Is kosher la Pesach or what?
I think so.
Yeah,
It's what's called. I think it is allowed, but it's
ShopRite, right? ShopRite is
all these things. Stores,
Because that's the Oraita today.
chametz, yes.
Everything else is the Rabbanan today.
Yeah, but I think that we have to sometimes do things.
I mean,
to
there are
help people
rabbis
out.
that are totally against this, right, Rabbi? Oh.
There were rabbis who are against it. That's right, and then there are others who are more lenient about it. Yeah. So the Gemara says, one second, Ihachi, if there's such a rabbinic law, now turning to Samach Zayin Amid Beis, Afilu Chala Nami. So why did they say that the challah of the non-Jew is not challah? They should make a decree and say that the challah of the non-Jew is also challah, because people are going to sell their challah, they're going to sell their dough before it becomes finished, before it becomes a dough, to the non-Jew, and let the non-Jew do the gilgul. So the Gemara says, no. If we wanted to worry about people trying to avoid challah, we're not going to really accomplish anything by saying that the non-Jew's challah is also challah. Because people can always avoid challah. They can take the flour and put it into 2 bowls, and instead of making a dough of 5 pounds of flour, they can make a dough of 4.5 pounds of flour. And then they are exempt from challah. So people want to avoid it, they can avoid it. So therefore, we're not going to create a rule. So 1 second, truma nami. If people want to avoid truma, also they can avoid truma. After Reb Oshia, first of all, they have the subterfuge of Reb Oshia. Dam Reb Oshia marim adam al tvu aso umachnisa b'mot shala kadei shetei behemo cheles uptur min hamaiser. A person can take grain, and instead of separating the chaff and the stubble from the grain, he brings the grain into the barn with the chaff and stubble. So now it's animal food. Animal food's exempt from maestros. So a person can bring it in as animal food and it'll be exempt from maestros. Or there's another way, nami, or else, derech gagos, derech karfifos. If he brings the grain into the barn through the roof and through the backyard, the only time that grain is obligated in maestros, at sheyireh pnei abayis, it has to come in through the front door. But if it came in through the back or it came in through the roof, it's exempt from Trumas and Maisa. So people have their ways to avoid Trumas and Maisa. So if they have their ways, why are we worried about the Baalei Kisen, about the rich people selling their fields to the non-Jews and having the non-Jews do the Miruach to avoid Trumas and Maisa? So therefore we say even if the non-Jew will do the Miruach, there'll still be an obligation of Trumas and Maisa rabbinically. There are other ways that people could avoid Trumas and Maisa. Well, I said no, there's a difference. If somebody's trying to avoid Trumas and Maestros by bringing in the grain with the stubble, it's public. Everybody sees it. So Zila Bei Milsa, that's pretty insulting. People don't want to do that because that everybody sees it. He's a stingy fellow trying to avoid Trumas and Maestros. But to sell it to the non-Jew, nobody else sees. So therefore, if it's a private, Zila Bei Milsa, he doesn't feel bad about it. He's happy to do it. So therefore, this is a subterfuge that people are happy to do. Oh, so now we need to create a law to avoid it and say, sorry, you need to give the Trumas and Maisos, because even when a non-Jew does Miruach Midrabanan, it's obligated in Shumos and Maisos. Okay, now we go to the next Mishnah, going back to how the Minchas HaOmer was prepared. So Balol Isaron. Now the Kohen goes to this Isaron, this 5 pounds of soles, the Asir Saifa. Nasan Alav Shamno, he puts on this barley flour, its oil, Ulivonasa, and its spices. In other words, he puts the oil into a measuring cup, he puts the spices into the measuring cup, and now he has to make the dough. Yatzak. So now he pours the oil, uvalal, and he mixes the oil and the barley flour into a dough. Then Hanif, then the Kohen waves it, as we saw, out and in, up and down. And then Kamatz, and the Kohen takes a fistful out of the dough, puts it into a holy vessel, collects all the lavona, puts all of the spices into this holy vessel, this frankincense, and then walks up to the Mizbeach top, the hiktir, and he throws it into the fire. Vashar, and the rest of the bowl, Nechal Kohanim, the Kohanim get to eat it like any other shiarei mincha. Now, Mishakarav HaOmer, the moment that the Omer was brought, Yotzin, they would go out to the streets, Umotzin Shuk Yerushalayim, Shumale Kemach. They would find that the market of Yerushalayim was filled with flour. And yes, the new grain was now being sold. And kali, they would find caramelized, caramel flour, popped corn, popped wheat kernels. So this is Shalom Baratzon Chacham Div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says he's not happy about it. The rabbi's not happy. You can't eat it until the Omer is brought. So to start preparing all this food, which isn't kosher yet, is dangerous, because if you prepare food, people like to snack on it. Yeah. So then they might be eating chadash before they're allowed to. However, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. You can prepare food even though you can't eat it. So you'll eat it when you're allowed to eat it. But to prepare it, people are not going to necessarily snack. The sages were 100% approving of this. So now we're going to have this argument. Please.
So there will be kotzrim. Ha'am kotzrim.
Yeah. Or maybe that day already.
It's against.
Maybe later that night, after they cut the chadash. That night, in the morning.
So Rabbi, the Kohanim, after they eat, whatever left over, they could take it to their wives and the family,
No,
right?
they couldn't leave the azara.
You cannot leave the Azara?
No, they had to eat it in the azara. It was kachin. It was like the meat of a chatas. The family can't eat it.
So then, how about his family? What the heck they eat?
Truma.
They eat the truma.
Truma, they get a lot of truma.
Ah.
So ask the Gemara, is it true that Rabbi Yehuda is not worried about people snacking? Is it true that Rabbi Yehuda is not worried that people might eat? What about the fact that in regards to B'dikas Chametz, Rabbi Yehuda says don't do B'dikas Chametz on Pesach, because if you do B'dikas Chametz on Pesach, you might eat the Chametz. Or meaning, I'll challenge you, Rabbi Yehuda says both can you check for Chametz or Arba Asar, the night of the 14th. Arba Asar Shachis, you can check for Chametz in the morning of the 14th. And B'Shas Sabir in the afternoon of the 14th. But not later. Why not later? Because you might eat it. The Chacham say, no, lo badak, if you didn't check, so then you check on Chol HaMoed. They're not worried you might eat it. So my Rabba said, Shiny Chadash. Rabbi Yehuda makes a distinction between Chadash and Chametz. Mitoch shelo itartelo el yalidei kituf. Since you don't allow them to cut the grain in the normal way, as Izzy brought up. If they can just pick it by hand. So Zachar, who he remembers not to eat it, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay, whatever they pick by hand, they could prepare before, and the moment the Omer is brought, they can start selling, and now it'll all be okay. So may these words of Torah be a schus to the Nishmas Rav Meir Shapiro, blessed memory.